morning, my name is Kolby of I'm with Clearwater Consulting. We're a lake and fisheries management company located in Magnolia, Texas, just north of Houston, but really we do water quality, pond stocking, electrofishing all over the state of Texas. All right, so first of all, I just want to lead off with a little story here. So we have a couple ranches in South Texas, and 5-10 years ago, if you would have asked these guys, if you could have gone out on a foggy fall morning like this morning and either sit in a boat and go fishing or sit in a hunting blind, what would you choose? 10 out of 10 guys would have said, I'd rather go sit in a hunting blind. Now, we have one ranch in particular located just southwest of San Antonio where the ranch manager would bring out the same 5 to 10 guys every year, and they would do this, and they go hunting, just have a good time out there on the ranch. Pretty soon what they would start doing is they go hunting in the morning, then they'd fish during the day out there on their lakes, and then they go hunting in the evening again. Well, after a couple years had passed, they began to catch some pretty big fish out there in their lake. And we began to see this slow transition where some of the guys they might hunt in the morning once, but man, they were really out there because they wanted to go fish. And we even had some guys who would say, I hunted earlier in the year, man, I just want to come out here and fish and just do that from going on forward. And so it's just really cool to see how you can kind of mix this mentality of growing big deer, but also growing big bass to kind of combat each other and work together in this system that you're always going to have something to do, because the reality is that most of the time deer season or whatever you're hunting for only lasts for a short period of time, and then you're left with having to make a decision of what else you do for the rest of the year. And so I'm just going to kind of go over, the total aspect of what it is to start to finish, the process we go to from designing a pond to the actual management, the water quality, habitat, fisheries, and so on, and just kind of get into it all. And so first we'd like to start with the design aspect of a lake. And so when you're designing a lake, there's a couple things we want to look at. Obviously, we have to see a hydrological study, which means we want to see the runoff, like how well is the soil going to hold the water? How well is this lake going to receive precipitation versus evaporation? We're going to look at the feasibility of the water body. Is this even possible? Because what you don't want is you don't want to build a lake with very sandy soil, because you're going to have that constant leaching of water just draining through your soil column, and then your lake's never going to hold water. You're going to have trouble with your fisheries and just maintaining good water quality in there. And then we go through our initial design. We work directly with engineers to construct this lake. How deep does it need to be? Where does it need to be built? How does the dam need to be built so that it doesn't overflow during heavy rains? Like Harvey, we had several lakes that we've built in the last couple years that they worked flawlessly because we had good engineers on our part that really came in and helped us design these dams and these spillways and these overflows to ensure that all the fish stayed in the lake and that the productivity of this lake continued to thrive. And then we go through our habitat draft, which is our really first step in the management aspect of this lake. We go from designing it, will it hold water, to what is the fisheries going to look like in this lake. And then finally, we go to our final draft, and that's just kind of like, here is the grand scope of everything that we're doing. And after that, that's really when the construction phase begins. And so that's kind of the first couple steps we take to designing a pond. And so, like I was talking about, we always want to look at the watershed. And so we have several lakes that were actually built in canyons. And so we would dam up one side, and we would look at the type of water to be flowing in, whether it was going to be flowing in from rocks or sediment, because that depends on the minerals that get washed into the lake and everything that has to do with the water chemistry. And so we look at all these runoffs and where is the best spot to build this lake, because you may want it at point A, but realize that that it's better at point B. And so you're trying to find a compromise of exactly, what is the best for the body of water and the best for your land as well. And so another thing we also like to look at is we also like to bring up historical data. Historical data is very important when you're designing a lake, mainly because we look at precipitation events over the past 75 years, 75 to 100 years, which comes into account when you have 100-year floods and such. And then we also look at our evaporation rates, because we want to make sure that we're building this lake deep enough and we have our slopes on the bank steep enough so that way that our precipitation and our evaporation are either equal, or precipitation is just a little bit more, because one thing we don't want to happen is to build a lake in a very dry area and not build it correctly, and you end up having your evaporation rates much higher than your precipitation rates. And so let's talk a little bit about the slopes. Most people just kind of assume, man, you just dig a hole in the ground and you're good to go. You start putting fish in it, start putting habitat in it, manage the weeds, and that's it. But there's actually a very big science to the slopes in the lake. In fact, we recommend that your initial slope off of your bank or your marginal should be a 3-to-1 grade at least. And we actually like to see lakes that are even up to a 5-to-1 grade, 5 feet drop for every 1 foot out from the shore. This definitely helps with preventing your aquatic vegetation growing on the shore. And then it also gives these beautiful marginal plants, like some pickerel weed or some thalia to grow on the banks here. And so it just makes the lake very aesthetically pleasing, and it just makes a lot of these homeowners, ranch owners, it's just a nice place, take your family out, or just, to kind of look at the lake and just make it kind of like a serene place for you to go. And then we also have several other drop-offs. You don't want a lake to just drop off into a hole and then be flat at the very bottom. You want to have several elevation changes in there so that you can have fish sitting on drop-offs. You can place structure in varying depths of water. It also gives your owners an awesome opportunity to target fish in different areas of water. Maybe during the summer, you want to target fish in deeper water because the water temperature is cooler. They're going to hopefully stay down there in that layer and be a little bit more active than they would in those shallower, warmer waters. Likewise, in the winter, you're definitely going to want to fish that shallower water, especially because you're going to have fish spawning. And so having these varying depth levels gives you an awesome opportunity to just have a great variance of fish, habitat, structure, and all sorts of things in your lake. And so really the grand scheme of designing a lake really plays into how the water is going to run in, how is it going to fill up, and how is it going to maintain water. And this just really gives you a full picture, and this is why we work so closely with our engineers as well as our experts in lake design work, because they're going to come in and they're going to tell us exactly what we need to do to make sure this is the most productive body of water that you can possibly have. And so let's get into a little bit about our water quality, water chemistry, water clarity, and water fertility. And so we always like to start with water chemistry because what your water chemistry really comes down to is it's the amount of minerals and limiting elements that are going to be in your soil. And this can wash into the water either by the soil that is on the bottom of your lake, but in big flood occurrences, you have a lot of water that washes in. So this also happens to be, what minerals does your property have? What minerals does your neighbor's property have, and how is that going to affect the water quality when it washes in? And how is it going to affect, the hardness, the pH, and all these different parameters that we test. We also look at conductivity. We do a lot of electroshocking surveys, and so conductivity is a big part of making sure we can get a good shock going through the entire water column. This allows us to pull fish up, hold fish better, and just allows us to get a better survey in. It also helps us to make sure that your fish are within the right conductivity salinity range so that they are healthy, and it just helps us get a better idea of the overall water chemistry. We also look at calcium levels in fish production, and so that's just a way that these calcium levels, these fish absorb these nutrients, and so we're definitely there to make sure that all of these parameters are within check. And so really this ultimately comes down to making sure that we have good clarity in the water and that a good color in the water, especially during our summer months. Our summer months, if this water gets really clear, you have a lot of light penetration all the way down to the bottom. This can cause some harmful aquatic plants, or just not really harmful, but nuisance aquatic plants to take over. And so we definitely want to control this clarity, and we control this with several ways, with whether it's adding like a blue-black dye to make a different color, or just like fertilizing to make sure that a good planktonic bloom is established. And so many of the lakes that we actually start out and we come to our very first visit is what most people would consider as very muddy, murky water. And so you walk up and it's just brown, and it doesn't look like much could live in there. There's just not hardly any visibility, maybe 4 to 6 inches at most. And this is one of our biggest parts of the industry, is that we have a special material that we can use that it's similar to like gypsum, but it's not really the same. It's a special product that we've actually worked with several rocking companies to develop ourselves, and we use this material, and it actually collects to the suspended clay in the water and drops it all the way to the bottom. And so this lake that once used to have 4 to 6 inches of visibility, all at once we're getting visibility of 10 to 12 to 20 feet, which is great initially, because what this muddy water does is it actually inhibits all of your little invertebrates that live at the bottom of your lake, as well as your smaller fish fry from developing properly and giving good adequate food source to the water body. And so with dropping all this clay sediment to the bottom and clearing up this water, we're able to then make the water pretty. You can take a boat out there and you can see down into the water. You can see your fish swimming. You can actually see the wildlife, and it actually provides a great habitat and food source for many of these fish species. And so another part is, we can test all these parameters ourselves, and we can get ranges of stuff, but really we're just looking specifically at the calcium in the water, the pH of the water, the hardness, which is actually calcium carbonate that the water holds. And those are really the 3 main parameters that we like to test. But a big part of our industry is, we want to know the full picture. We want to know exactly what's happening to the water body, and if something was to change. So before we start anything, before we go and we drop this clay sediment, before we go and add fish or habitat or anything like that, we actually take water samples, and we send these off to Texas A&M University. We work very closely with Texas A&M University, and they actually give us full water tests and water quality. They give us all the parameters, everything that you could know about the water. This also helps us to know how much we need to fertilize these lakes to make sure we get a good bloom. They give us the phosphorus, they give us the nitrogen in the water, they give us the calcium in the water, they give us the pH, the hardness, alkalinity, several of these measures that we could measure them ourselves, but it would be very difficult, very time consuming to do. We can just send this water sample off to Texas A&M, and they'll just run all these parameters for us and send us a full report. And one thing that we love to do is just kind of sit down with our clients and walk them through what this report means, and just show them like, hey, this is awesome because we're seeing this, and this, and it's just like your lake is looking really productive in these areas, but it's looking like your calcium carbonate's a little low and your hardness is just a little low, and so that's making your water a little murky. And so we'll come in and based on this water report, we'll essentially devise a plan on how we can tackle your water quality of your lake and just make it more efficient. And so this picture up on the screen here is actually a before and after picture of some of our, we call it our flocculant, our flocking material. And this is the stuff that I was telling you about earlier about it binds to those clay particles in the water and actually drops them to the bottom. So this before picture is actually 2 days before the after picture. So you can see that you see substantial water clarity come from adding this material to the water. And it's actually very rapid too. We load it up several tons at a time on a pontoon boat, and we mix it in the water using a fire hose. And so this is just visual proof that this stuff is just great and is a great way to start making your lake the most productive that it could actually be. Like I was saying earlier, so whenever you drop this clay particles out, you allow a planktonic bloom to actually establish in the water column because light's able to penetrate. This is really good for your bait fish, especially your little fry, because several of your fry species will actually feed on some of the macroorganisms and the microplanktonic organisms, zooplankton, phytoplankton that live in this water column. And so this, and that's really the best way to get a good bait fish population, bass population going in the right direction, is start from the bottom up. Yeah, you can put in, 2 to 3 pounders every year, but you're going to be spending a lot of money on stocking fish every year when you could worry about your water quality and have a productive bloom, have a productive spawn each year, and then all at once we're not worried about stocking fish every year. We're mainly worrying about keeping your population numbers right. Whether we have too much bass, whether we don't have enough bluegill or whatever that is. And so water quality just goes a long way with making sure that we get our fish population correct. And so I just want to kind of move on to habitat. Habitat is really kind of the second step of or really the third step in the process after the design phase. After you mess with your water quality and your water chemistry phase, we get into adding habitat. Now, habitat is very vital to a water body. We've already surveyed several lakes this year where there were just deep pits, smooth on the bottom, and pretty much no habitat whatsoever. The bait populations were smaller than they should be, and your bass are super skinny. It's kind of funny because bass are very similar to humans, and the fact that the more that they have to chase their food, the skinnier they are. If we had to run and we had to actually go chase and catch every meal that we ate, we would all be like skin and bones, super thin. And that's just the matter of fact. And so adding this habitat actually gives these bass a place to ambush predators, ambush prey, because they are ambush predators. And so they love to just like hang out in these brush piles. We do what we call Christmas tree reefs. We actually tie several Christmas trees, 20 to 30 at a time, and sink them in little reef formations. And so this really gives bass a place to hide so that they can ambush the prey. But at the same time, this is also really good for your bait population in terms of your bluegill, your red ear sunfish, even sometimes your shad. They can ball up in this habitat, and this really gives them kind of a refuge, because even though the bass are hanging out to ambush the prey in this habitat, it also gives these bluegill and all these sunfish species and all your bait fish an area to hide. So your bass aren't constantly out chasing, your bluegill aren't constantly being pressured by your bass, and it just kind of gives them a little refuge. Some of the similar habitat structures that we use, so I've obviously talked about Christmas trees and putting those in the water and sinking cedar trees, but we also do other stuff such as what you naturally find in the water. Sometimes we'll push boulders into the water, we'll throw big rocks, we'll install gravel, make gravel beds, and really just any habitat you can throw in there. We do several artificial structures as well. I know several people do, stuff made out of PVC or throwing old tires in their lakes. And so habitat comes in a variety of forms and it's just a great way to improve your bait population, as well as your bass population and numbers. And so I just want to get into a little bit today about our fisheries science. So up here on the board, I have several pictures of some of the fish that we've shocked up in the past, some of the big bass that we're really seeing come from some of our most productive lakes. We're seeing lakes where it's not abnormal to pull, a 10 to 12 pound bass out every day. And so that's doing really well, but we also do other things. We worry about our shiner population, our golden shiner population, our bluegill, our red ear population, and then shad, if possible. Which shad is a very interesting story, because shad is one of those fish species that can only survive in waters that have very high productivity and very high planktonic blooms. And so we'll often stock shad in these lakes, and a lot of times it's kind of like a fingers crossed type deal, where we'll come in and this lake has a great bloom and the shad will just take off like crazy. And so it's just one of those things that shad are they're very funny whenever it comes to stocking them in a lake and making sure that they're productive. But let me tell you, if you can get shad in a lake, it will make all the world of difference. We have several lakes that have great shad spawns this year, so much to the point where we're expecting, and we've actually seen in the past, where bass will put on 2 to 3 pounds in a growing season just because we have shad in the lake. And so it's just a great opportunity to stock more fish and really get those bass numbers up high. That way your bass are being more productive, and you're just adding another element to your bait fish. This is a great way to take pressure off of your bluegill and your red ear. The bluegill and your red ear are your main food source of your bass, but if you can add in supplemental forage such as fathead minnows every year, or shiners every year, or you want to stock shad, and these guys can reproduce and create these nice spawns, then all at once your bluegill populations are going to explode, which just puts you in a great place for having a very productive year as far as feeding your bass goes. And I have been talking a lot about bass, but I would just like to note that these are all, we're very bass minded here at Clearwater, but at the same time we do see a lot of productivity with our crappie lakes as well as our catfish lakes, and our striper lakes even. And really it's all the same when it comes to making sure you have good water quality, a good amount of bait fish, and just all these same parameters pretty much apply across the board for all these fish species. And so one thing that other companies will do, or you'll see people, they constantly want to add forage. They constantly want to add supplemental bait. And here at Clearwater, yes, we can add bait every year, but that can be very expensive and very time consuming for our clients. And we would much rather use those resources on adding habitat, making sure our populations are correct, rather than stocking fish every year. And so we really believe in a natural production of fisheries. That's why we stress habitat and water quality so much, is because if you have these things right, then there's no need to come in and stock fish every year. You don't have to put 50 pounds of fatheads in every year. You don't have to continually add bluegill every year. These guys are going to have great spawns, and they're naturally going to produce fry. They're going to grow up into big adults, and they're just going to feed your fish, your bass, your crappie, your catfish, whatever it may be. And so, rather than doing that, we want to really focus on making sure this is more of a productive lake than like a supplemental feeding lake. Another thing that we look at is we also look at our predator densities. With one of our first meetings with our clients, we always want to come in, what do you want? Because this company is all about, doing what you want, what's best for you. Do you want a high high catch yield rate for your lake? Do you want to catch fish every cast? Or are you looking for more of a trophy lake? And then based on that, we build kind of a bait fish, a stocking plan, habitat plan, and everything to make sure that we take care of you how you want. Because, you know, if you're looking for a trophy lake here, we don't want you catching a fish that's 1 pound to 2 pounds every cast. That defeats the purpose. And so that's actually where we get into some of our surveying and making sure that all of our densities are correct. And so talking about our surveys and making sure our density is correct, it's more than just, you know, surveying these fish and making sure we have big bass in the lake. We do a lot with making sure we take the correct amount of bass out, making sure we have the correct amount of bait fish in that lake, as well as doing several removal of species. Some of our highest productivity bass lakes actually are filled with species such as gar carp and mudcats. And so part of the surveys is we actually will come out and take these species out. As you see up here on the screen, we have several of these species that we take out because the goal is to ultimately, you know, balance your predators. It's okay if you want to have catfish and bass in there, but you don't want carp, because we go back to water quality again, and these carp are going to muddy up this water, preventing those invertebrates from really taking hold to this water body. And so it really being productive in this. And so we want to come in and, you know, we want to do what's best for the lake. And sometimes, you know, taking these gar, taking these carp out, taking these catfish out is ultimately what's best for the water quality in this sense. And so we do a lot of, you know, predator densities, prey densities, and just kind of like individualizing your lake and making sure that you have the correct densities of each. And so another part of fishery science that I would like to touch on is, you know, you always hear this talk about, you know, what's better? Do you want your Florida bass or do you want your native bass? What's it going to be? And I'm just going to be real honest with you. Here in Texas, it's very difficult to get Florida bass up in the northern part of the state just because our water temperatures do get a little cold on some of these hard winters. But Florida bass are a great way to definitely improve your trophy fisheries. This is one of those instances that if you're looking for low catch rates and big bodied fish, then Florida's going to be the way you want to go. And we actually do genetic tests on this in a series of fin clips and you know, just other genetic tests. We stock Floridas in several of our lakes across the state, and we move them because they overpopulate. They populate really fast. And so this graph that you actually see up on the screen here is one of our genetic tests that we got in, and what it does is it measures the percentage of Florida genetics versus the percentage of natural or Texas genetics in these fish. And so what this actually allows us to do is to go in and see, okay, you've got a bunch of F1s, you've got a bunch of hybrids between your Florida and between your native Texas bass. And so we can go from there. We can say, all right, well, you're looking for high catch rates, so I would probably just, you know, stick with doing our native Texas bass as opposed to doing our Floridas. But several of our lakes are looking for trophy fisheries, and so we're just like, man, you need Florida bass because that's what's going to get you to the, you know, your 10 to 15 pound fish. And so that's just one ways that we're trying to improve and make sure that we have really pure genetics in all of our lakes. And so lake and fisheries management is really an all-encompassing effect. This little graph in the middle, I think, is an excellent representation of what we're looking at here. Is yes, you can focus on one aspect of your lake. You can focus on your water quality, and again, that's going to be great, but that's not going to grow your trophy fish. Or you can focus on just habitat. But yeah, so you can focus on several of these aspects individually, but overall, it's really only going to get you so far. And so this middle graph here is, I think, a great representation that all of these aspects that I've been talking about so far really overlap with one another. And you really have to take a proactive approach when you come and you're talking about lake and fisheries management. It comes down to, you know, you want to make sure you're staying on top of your weeds. You want to make sure you get your bloom established correctly. You want to make sure that you're stocking or you're making sure that your fish populations are correct. And this is one of those things that it's better to do it earlier rather than later, because if you wait too late, then you're always going to be too far behind. And so it's just a great way to you know, just make sure that your lake is being the most productive. So we actually do this by shocking the water. So what you do is we have our electrofishing boat, and we have a generator on board, and this generator actually sends electrical currents out through booms, and then it circles back around and uses the boat as the ground. And so this allows electricity to circulate just right in front of the boat. And this is actually one of the safest and most efficient ways to check on your fish in your lake. This allows us to get population counts on our bluegill and other sunfish species, as well as see our bass. This is how we see some of these biggest bass that we pull out of these lakes, is we're shocking this water, and what happens is they kind of do like a belly roll. So it stuns them for just a minute, just long enough for them to come up to the surface where we can net them. We put them in our live well. We resuscitate them, you know, kind of get them back to health. We take length and weight measurements. We maybe do a fin clip to get genetics on it, and then we release them at the end of the survey. And so this really gives us a great opportunity. And several of the bass that you've seen up on the slideshow so far have actually come from a lot of our surveys. And so this is just a great way for us to get a good population count without harming the fish or really stressing them out too much. It actually provides very low stress for the fish. And so I kind of want to transition now into more of like the management aspect of the lakes, because we can go through all these things. We can get our water quality right, we can get our design right, we can get our fisheries even right. But at the end of the day, there's always these little, you know, kind of like gimmicks, gizmos, gadgets that we can add to the lake to make them more efficient, make management a little bit easier on you. And one of these is aeration. So what this aeration does, and we actually recommend this in all of our lakes, is it actually turns the water body over. So it prevents your water from stratifying. So when your water stratifies, what that means is that you're going to have like a layer. This usually happens in the summer months, where you have a layer of cooler water below and a layer of warmer water above. And actually just motoring a boat through your lake can actually turn these water bodies over without aeration. It can actually produce fish kills. And so this aeration is just a great way that you can push compressed air to the bottom of your lake. It lifts it up to the surface, and it just continues to turn over your water body constantly. We work with a company called Vertex, and Vertex actually designs these things for us. So we work directly with them. We come to you and say, hey, we recommend putting an aeration system in here. It's going to be more efficient for your fisheries and your water quality. You're going to keep bloom better, and your lake isn't going to stratify during these hot summer months. And so what we do is we come in and we send them an aerial. We find average depths, and we say this is about how much acre feet of water we would like to move. And they come in and say, okay, cool, this is exactly how many times your lake needs to be turned over each day to prevent it from completely stratifying. And then they work us up exactly how many diffusers, how much air needs to be being pushed through these lakes each day. And it's just a great way to promote a healthy fisheries. And it actually works very well with aquatic vegetation. I mean, we've seen lakes that have terrible duckweed and algae problems, and you'll put this aeration system in, and that moving water just allows these plants to not take root and to not take over this lake. A lot of these plants need to get established in, you know, still water that's not very productive. And so just adding this little bit of movement to the water allows, or it makes it where your plants aren't more or less willing to get established, which is actually turns out better for you in the long run, because you're not having to spend money on treating these plants to make sure that your lake is always looking pretty. Instead, you spend money up front on your aeration system, and it saves you a ton of money and time and effort over the course of several years and even several decades. Another management technique that we use is addition of dye and or chemicals to the water, which I would like to preface that all of the chemicals that we use are completely safe. We work with our own chemical rep, and they actually test these and make sure that all of these are safe to put in the water, safe for the fish, safe for your livestock and other wildlife, and safe for people as well. And so, just doing standard treatments throughout the growing season, which the growing season in this area of Texas is roughly from about the end of March through about September. Once the water temperatures start to cool off a little bit is when we start seeing these plants start to die back, and we really start to see that you have your productivity in your lake starts to go up. But during these summer months, we're constantly treating. We have some before and after pictures up here on the screen of just what a couple days will look like after we did an extensive algae treatment, and just the difference it makes in keeping your water clear. And another way to prevent this aquatic vegetation from growing is adding dye to the lake. A lot of people like the color. It prevents light penetration through the water body, and just overall it's a great way to make sure that you limit your aquatic plant growth during the summer, as well as just giving it that aesthetically pleasing look. Some of the submerged aquatic vegetations that we deal with are up on the screen. And so, we deal with a lot with algae, coontail pondweed, bushy pondweed, American pondweed, lotus, hydrilla, and these are really the main ones. And so, we have special chemicals that we use, and we're able to control these throughout the summer months pretty well. And with all the experience that we have in our company, and we've had guys that have been doing this, for 30 years now. They've pretty much seen it all, which is great for us, because we can come into the lake, we can walk up to me and say, this is it, and this is what you need to do. And so, aquatic plants, unfortunately, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to deal with during the growing months of the summer. So in a lot of these lakes, we also have what we call marginal plants, which are the plants that grow along the shore. And several of these plants are really good. So we have up here some iris, some thalia, some pickerel weed, and those are all really great plants. But there are some plants that like to take over, very invasive to the marginals, such as cattails, alligator weed, primrose, wire hyacinth. And so these are really the ones that we try to focus and maintain. Yeah, they're pretty, but if you're not careful, these will take over your entire lake. And so this is kind of like what we do during our summer months, during our growing months, is really focus on maintaining these things, because as we've seen this last couple of years, we haven't really had a cold winter here in a while, and so these plants just keep getting worse and worse from year to year. And we have people that call us, oh man, I saw it 2 years ago and now it's just awful, it's 100% all the way to the top, where it's like, okay. And so aquatic plants is just one of those things you really got to stay on top of, and just kind of goes back to that proactive approach. And so I just kind of like to end this presentation with some management going forward. And so really the big thing is just continued aquatic plant control. And so it's just something that you're going to have to do every summer. The good thing is that if you worry about your water quality and you're getting a bloom established early in the spring, then you actually don't have to worry about these plants as much, because the light doesn't penetrate. You don't have to worry about dyeing your water. And so it just kind of limits this plant growth. And so it just always goes back to that being proactive with what you're doing with your lake. And then, just doing simple maintenance on, your aeration systems and fountains. Doing rebuild kits every once in a while. Rebuild is kind of like an oil change for your car. you wouldn't run your car without giving it an oil change every once in a while, because your car would just go bad. It just wouldn't function like it's supposed to. It's very similar with a lot of our aeration systems. And then, of course, we have our supplemental fish stocking. Supplemental fish stocking is a great way to increase your bass numbers, or your crappie or your catfish or whatever it may be numbers and weights each year. So that's really our management going forward. And so that concludes my presentation. Thank y'all for having me, and if you have any questions, feel free to find me afterwards, and I'd love to talk to y'all and answer anything that you may be curious about.